Welcome to A Perfect Touch. I'm Jeanette. It was the season of Halloween when Gwen's Shenanigans proposed #gunnesaxmas, a costumer's collaboration creating a gunny sax outfit with a Halloween impression. I joined in the fun using a vintage gunny sax licensed pattern by Simplicity and created this. And then I wrote on my blog and created a video sharing a bit of the history of gunny sax and the process of sewing my gunnesaxmas outfit. As the holiday season approached, Gwen's Shenanigans proposed that we extend our gunny sax fun using the hashtag gunnesaxmas, which will be inclusive of all holidays and traditions and inspired fabrics. Of course, since I had so much fun creating for Halloween, I'm ready to create for the holidays and want to again use the pattern I used before, Simplicity 5491 Gunny Sax Licensed. I had also joined a collaboration for #HolidayApron, and that blog post and video were published earlier. The fabric I'm using for this project is called Cardinals on White Ice with Silver Metallic from the Joyful Traditions collection by Hoffman. I purchased enough for the holiday apron and parts of the jacket and skirt for this project. For other parts of the jacket and skirt, I purchased a coordinating Hoffman fabric called Joyful Traditions Ornate Damask Scroll in black and silver. Both of those fabrics are cotton. The jacket requires a bias edging, as did the apron. After considering many options, I always came back to the one that I loved immediately when I saw it. Isn't that often the case? And it was a red with black buffalo plaid. As often happens in creating an historical, or in this case vintage garment, there is research and learning that naturally occurs. This project was no different as I began to wonder about the history of buffalo plaid. As you can see, it is a check with large blocks formed by the intersection of two colors. According to the Scottish Tartan's Authority, it is, in fact, the Rob Roy tartan. It was introduced to North America by a descendant of Rob Roy, Jock McCluskey. As an Indian trader, McCluskey championed the Indians' cause. His reasons were personal, seeing their plight as similar to his own family clan's descent from nobility to hunted criminals. Eventually, the plaid made its way to the Woolwich Woolen Mills, where in the Northeast in 1850, the company began producing shirts in the red and black. The tale goes that the name Buffalo Plaid comes from the fact that the mill's designer at the time owned a herd of buffalo. The combination of the vivid red and the clear black has retained its popularity over these 170 years, and since these colors provide a perfect touch for the cardinals on the fabric, it is my choice for bias edging and several accessories I will share later. When light hits the silver metallic in the two cotton fabrics, they just sparkle and shine. I've purchased enough of the buffalo plaid for the bias edging and the lining of the jacket, and proceed to cut enough bias strips for both this and the apron project. The skirt pieces consist of a front in two parts, a back in two parts, a waistband with interfacing, 4 pocket pieces, and a ruffle. I have a zipper and pretty velvet and ribbon embroidered button. The center front seam is sewn. The center back seam is sewn and the zipper added. The pocket pieces are sewn to both edges of the front and back skirt sections. The side seams are sewn, including the pocket edges. The skirt edge is sewn slightly below the top edge of the pocket and slightly above the bottom edge of the pocket to create a clean pocket opening. The fusible interfacing is applied to the waistband and the lower edge seam allowance turned under. The unfolded edge is sewn to the skirt, right sides together. The ends of the waistband are folded in half, stitched together, and the seam allowance is clipped. The ends are turned right side out, and the waistband folded edge turned to cover the long seam just sewn, and then hand-stitched in place. A snap is sewn on the waistband, and the velvet button sewn to cover the snap stitches. The upper part of the skirt is now complete with warm buffalo plaid pockets. My plan for the jacket and skirt was to combine the cotton fabrics to make best use of them, including what I needed for the apron. I had determined I had enough of the cardinal fabric for the ruffle if I used the dark fabric for the sleeves of the jacket. I tested several options of lace and plaid bias on the skirt by pinning things together, and finally decided I liked this treatment, a bias with lace on the lower edge of the upper skirt and on the lower edge of the ruffle. And I have enough lace for the 80 inches of upper skirt and 120 inches of ruffle. Yay! With the embellishment decision made, I add the bias plaid and lace to the lower edge of the skirt. The ruffle was cut from the 42-inch wide fabric, from selvage to selvage, and 12 inches wide. The ruffle pieces are sewn into a continuous loop. The bias strips are also sewn together. The bias is sewn to the lower edge and the lace added. 2 gathering threads are sewn at the top of the ruffle. Pins are placed, dividing both the ruffle and the skirt into 6 even sections for ease and evenness of gathering. The ruffle is gathered, pinned to the lower edge of the skirt, and sewn in place. I'm thinking these American Duchess boots will be warm and wonderful with this skirt, and the tassels give me an idea for another part of this project. The jacket parts are a back, underarm sides, fronts, sleeves, and collar. Just to double check that I like the fabric layout choices I've made, and the bit of buffalo plaid lining peering out from the edge of the cotton fabric gives me an idea. The idea is to add the bias plaid to the jacket seams as well as around the outside edges and sleeve ends. I sew the bias to the edges of each underarm side and the shoulder seam. I love the plaid, and I'm glad I had enough of it to add these additional details to the jacket. When I made this jacket for Halloween, I had quilted the jacket fabric. My plan for this jacket was to quilt each cardinal using trapunto technique with silver metallic thread. The trial was woefully unremarkable for the time invested and the idea scrapped. The lower edge of the sleeves has bias and lace added, the sleeve heads pleated and basted according to the pattern, and the inner seam sewn closed. The jacket sections are sewn together, and now the collar can be added. The collar interfacing is fused, and the lower edge seam allowance turned under. The inside collar is sewn to the jacket. Then the outside collar is sewn to the inside collar close to the edges and top stitched to the jacket to cover the inside collar seam. The plaid bias can now be sewn around the collar, fronts, and lower sides and back. The sleeves are set, pinned, and sewn. I've recently started some research into 1930s fashion in preparation for an adventure in 2022. Details coming in the spring. I found some wonderful patterns, including this one from the Vintage Pattern Lending Library for a 1935 7-piece ensemble from a vintage Weldon's pattern. It includes a pattern for a beret, and the illustration in red inspired me to try this pattern for this holiday gunny sacks. Nothing like mixing eras. I've cut 2 pieces each of the crown tip and the under beret, and a single layer of crinoline for each. The crown tip seam is sewn closed, and the entire surface sewn with evenly spaced circles. The back seam of the under beret is also sewn closed. The under beret is sewn to the crown tip, and the edge finished with a bias strip. I added another velvet and ribbon embroidered button to the crown center and 2 black tassels inspired by the boots. The cardinal is our state bird and one that lives in my yard throughout the year. We feed them black oil sunflower seeds, have a bird bath they often use, and I hope you seeing them in my yard brought you a little bit of joy this holiday season.